Welcome to a webinar on community justice centers. The Association of Justice and Treatment Professionals and its affiliated organization work on a very basic fundamental principle. And the principle is that continuing interdisciplinary education promotes effective planning, implementation, and operation of all forms of justice and treatment partnerships. And that is the reason why we have these webinars on a regular basis. And that is the reason why we are very pleased that today we have an opportunity to learn about community justice centers, the whys, the how, the impacts, and key components that are overlooked. And we are very pleased to have some experts to help us. But before we do that, some housekeeping matters. For the panelists, we remind you to keep your microphones muted until you until you speak, of course, and at that time it's unmuted. And for our participants, we are so glad you could join us today, and we want to engage with you. The best place to talk to us and for us to talk to you is the Q&A section. So don't worry about the chat, the Q&A. Send in your questions to the Q&A, and at the end of the webinar, we'll have an opportunity to speak to you. And also, the legal stuff, the views that are expressed by our speakers, as much as we are very glad to have them, they are not necessarily our views, and they are not necessarily the views of AJTP, IATCP, or NATTCP. And what I want to say is it takes a team to bring this to you. And so I want to thank Kim Briggs, who is here, lecturer from the University of Western Ontario, Jennifer Graham, assistant crown attorney in Brampton, Andy Rivard, Ontario Duty Council, Brampton, Mary Pagani of the Peel Addiction Assessment and Referral Center, and of course, myself, Justice Barnes. And so now that I have stalled enough, wasted enough time for enough of you to join, I think it's now time for us to have the land acknowledgement. And I did that without checking to see whether or not the person who is going to be doing this very important thing is here. Yes, Mary is here. Mary, over to you.
Thank you so much, Justice Barnes. So we'll begin this webinar by acknowledging that we are meeting on the Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Aboriginal peoples who have been the stewards of this land. In particular, we acknowledge the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this land. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, and our province and country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities, and in particular to bring justice for the lives lost in residential schools, as well as all the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls across the country. Thank you, and back to you, Justice Barnes.
Thank you. Today we are very pleased to have experts in this area. Dana Aaron is the Executive Director of the Justice Centers at the Criminal Law Division, Ministry of Attorney General. She spearheaded the ministry's Justice Centers program, and she has done so since its inception in 2017, and has been a driving force behind innovating Ontario's criminal justice system by implementing a new justice, health, and social services. That is a court model premised on the core location and integration service delivery of justice, health, and social services. She has spent over a decade prosecuting as an assistant Crown attorney, served as Crown lead in intimate partner violence, and acted as counsel to the Assistant Deputy Attorney General at the Ministry of Attorney General. And she will speak about the genesis of the Justice Center initiatives, as well as her long-term vision for how Ontario's justice centers will effect broader justice system transformation, including the participatory design processes in support of Kenora Justice Center pilot. Holly Luber is counsel at Justice Centers. She has over a decade of appellate prosecutorial experience and has appeared at every level of court in Ontario and the Supreme Court of Canada, with regular appearances at the Court of Appeal for Ontario. She has significant experience working with collaborative court models, having acted as the Deputy Director of Inmate Appeals at the Crown Law Office Criminal, and most recently, she has been working closely on the development of the Toronto Downtown East Justice Center. Then there's Scott McKean. He's manager of SafeTO Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, City of Toronto, and embedded Justice Center Strategic Community Lead Justice Centers, Office of the Assistant Deputy Minister, Criminal Law, Ministry of Attorney General. He's currently developing SafeTO, the City of Toronto's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and supporting the development of Ministry of Attorney General's Justice Center programs in the City of Toronto. Scott works to enhance community safety and reduce vulnerability for people, families, and places in Toronto's neighborhoods. While at the City of Toronto, Scott has led and supported the development and implementation of many strategies and initiatives, such as the Community Crisis Response Program, Focus Toronto, SPIDER, Youth Violence Prevention, and the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy. Prior to joining the City of Toronto, Scott worked in the community sector, where he developed a number of programs and services for young people, as well as developed the support model for the Out of the Code emergency program. Outside of community work, he plays drums and paints pictures. Then there's Steve Cordes, Chief Executive Officer, Youth Opportunities Unlimited. Steve has dedicated his career to community service. After he graduated from the University of Western Ontario with a BA Honours in Sociology in 1984, he joined Youth Opportunities Unlimited as his first job developer and has led the organization as its executive director since 1988. Under Steve's leadership, the organization has grown to an award-winning agency in the areas of youth employment, social enterprise, and affordable housing. He recently led the organization and its partners in a major project, a Housing First Youth Shelter, and is currently leading another significant project, a Youth Wellness Hub. This hub will include affordable housing, healthcare, education, and employment supports for youth adults. Steve has been awarded 2 Paul Harris Fellowships through Rotary International, an honorary diploma from Fanshawe College, and is a graduate of Community Shift through Ivy Business School. Whether in a public spotlight, on social media, or in his daily work, Steve shares his passion for community, youth development, and values-based leadership. He lives an active life that includes daily cycling, long-distance running, and extensive time spent with family. And Kylie Swift is lead for operations and sustainability, reciprocal consulting. She's a Métis woman whose family ancestral lands are from Red River Valley. Kelly's background includes a 30-year career in local government with 10 years as general manager of parks, recreation, and culture, and a lengthy term as acting chief administrative officer to support the city through a leadership transition. Throughout this career, Kelly initiated a range of partnerships and championed many community-led initiatives. She has facilitated community engagement and strategic planning processes with city councils and nonprofit organizations, and supported both supported both to move through change in ways that are engaging and collaborative. While with the city of Maple Ridge, Kelly was the city's liaison to Katzie and Kwantlen First Nations and the city's representative on the Indigenous Relations Committee with Metro Vancouver. She has an MBA from Royal Roads, a degree in business and liberal studies from Simon Fraser University, and other certifications, including a diploma in therapeutic recreation. She's also an active community volunteer and a founding member of the Golden Ears Métis Society. So that is our panel. We may run a little bit over today, maybe by 10 or 15 minutes. If you have to leave us, that's fine. We'll make sure that you get the recording, and that's because we started a bit late. Having done that, Dana, up to you. Over to you.
Thank you, Justice Barnes, and good afternoon, everybody. Next time I will learn to streamline the sort of introductions, but really happy to be here, happy for your association to have us. And with that, I'm going to get right to it, sharing my screen with a presentation that we have for you. And really, the genesis of this work is the work that we do with the people who are surrounding our courts and who serve people in communities. So I'll just take a moment to ask everybody if they can see the presentation from the beginning. And Scott, maybe you could put your fingers up, a thumbs up if you can actually see the presentation. So thumbs up from Scott. And really just quickly jump us all into a little bit of an overview of where we're going, and then we're going to jump back into it. But really, my hope today is to start off with a bit of an introduction about the background, the approach we've taken in Ontario, with respect to the development of Ontario's Justice Centre model, our current context, and some provincial developments. I'll really take a moment and just a couple of minutes to talk about the participatory design process and the needs assessment that have really grounded the work that we've done in Ontario. And then I'll turn it over to Holly, who will take us through the respective pilots that we've embarked on. So we talked about this for many years, and we've actually been doing it and testing it and iterating as we go. And then really excited to have Scott McKean here, who you'll hear from, who really works with the city and has done so much work, as you heard in his bio, but really, you know, the partnership that we've developed with the City of Toronto to really bring this model to life in two different, very different locations in the city, and how we've worked with different levels of government to do so. Turning it over to Steve Cordes, who will talk about the amazing work in YOU, and how really, you know, this isn't always about the infrastructure that you create, it's about partnering with people who are already building amazing things. And then really excited to have Kylie here, who's going to talk to us about the Indigenous-led evaluation work, because I think, you know, an evidence-based approach to this work to help, you know, other professions, whether it's justice, whether it's health, whether it's social services, in how we can work together through different types of specialized courts, community courts, and sort of integrated service delivery models. So moving right forward to the work that we're doing in the development of the Community Justice Centre model in Ontario, which is really serving targeted populations at each of the respective sites. And so as of September 2020, we sort of began implementing the model. It's taking place in 4 locations, as you're going to hear from Holly: Kenora, London, Toronto Downtown East, and Toronto Northwest. And really the models, and we're not going to get into it, it's a whole presentation on itself, draws from community justice center, community courts around the world. Really, and we've taken pieces of the work in Chicago, the work in New Zealand, you know, the work in Australia, the work in Red Hook, really trying to develop in a made for Ontario model, and actually in Ontario making 4 different models, and how it's all grounded in the needs assessments that you're going to hear about. And so I just want to take a moment, because I think sometimes we talk about community justice centers, we talk about community courts, but the question is what are they? And generally speaking, justice centers, as I said, have been introduced in now over 100 different communities around the world. They take justice out of the courtroom generally and move it into a community setting where you work across sectors, whether it's bringing justice, health, employment, education, social services, to really get at, you know, the root causes that are bringing people in and intersecting with the criminal justice system, as we try to do in therapeutic courts. But we really try to take a multi-sector approach to really, you know, to look at, you know, in a localized way, how do we try to break the cycle of offending? How do we promote prevention? How do we promote meaningful rehabilitation, and how do we actually meet communities and people where they're at. And these models work best, and why you see the village of people that we hear today is when they're tailored to the needs of local communities, the strengths of local communities, where you co-locate, courtroom. And now that we have virtual processes with front-end supports, whether it's primary health care, mental health care, housing, employment, reintegration supports when you're coming out of custody. How do we do that? And look at the individuals and their families holistically, being cognizant that this model isn't just a diversion model, as we're working on it in Ontario. While we hope to promote both pre-charge and post-charge diversion, we really are looking also at the types of cases to break sort of the short, sharp dispositions that we commonly see time and time again, whether it's as a Crown and 30, 60, 90, 120, 160 days, where we know people are reintegrating back into community. So how do we promote successful reintegration, and how do we work with victims as part of this model? Because it's a really important piece where we take a holistic approach to supporting not just the accused, but families or people impacted by crime. And the way that we've done this in Ontario was really trying to take a whole of government approach. Because as a Crown, I think probably Justice Barnes as a judge, and I think all of us here from different justice sector perspectives and roles and responsibilities, we see that it's the things that wrap around people that make the difference. How do we bring that systems change together? It's easier said than done, as we've come to learn here, and as Scott will talk a little bit about it, but promoting justice-centered transformation really is about bringing systems and people at multi-levels of government, right down to the ground and right up high together to really work in a coordinated and collaborative fashion. And so, when we embarked on actually, designing and developing these pilots, we really, as we were on the cusp of doing it, we were doing it just as COVID hit. So just as we were building the plane, we had to change the design of the plane, and we had to actually start to redevelop it to respond to the changing circumstances that we had to really move towards a hybrid approach. So really, as the criminal justice system was modernizing and changing, we really had to start to include a plan for virtual and remote proceedings, really looking at the number of people, as we always had, but held on bail to reduce the pressure in the jails, and really think about those who are most vulnerable, who were falling through the cracks pre-COVID, who are continuing to fall through the cracks post-COVID, and how do we continue to support people in community while their court proceedings are virtual? And really, we really embarked on doing that, and you'll see that through the pilots that Holly will talk to you about. I wanted just to take a moment to really highlight the importance of how this work in Ontario has been grounded, and how some of the best justice centers around the world have been grounded by beginning with a community needs assessment. We had direction and support at the time to go in, and it's rare as Crowns, with the support of the judiciary, to ask communities across all sectors, how is justice working for you? How is it not working? We looked at our processes. We looked at how social services and community supports across sectors intersect with the criminal justice system, to really start to work with communities as well as the justice sector to really start to design this. And we did this through a needs assessment process. At the time, we worked with the Center for Court Innovation and Engagement Consultants, because Crowns are not engagement experts, nor is MAG something that MAG had traditionally done in this robust a way. And we worked, across government, and we really went into communities, each of the 4 communities, really open-minded and as transparent as we possibly could to really understand the needs at the time. And in each location, the idea is really to start to understand the gaps and the strengths and the socio-demographic issues, the community issues, and the respective sort of ecosystems and how they operate, and really try to understand what steps could we take within the design of this model. Would a community justice center model be responsive to the issues? Would it not? The idea isn't to impose this type of a model. It's really to ensure that you have community buy-in and what you're doing makes sense. And so to do so, we conducted community forums, we conducted focus groups, surveys, one-on-one interviews. And, we in the justice sector, we have, different committees that are within our courts that have, some representation from community organizations, but we talked across all sectors in each of the sites. Really so that including meeting with people with lived experience, I learned more about housing, education, and health, both at an intergovernmental level and at a community level, as did everyone on our team, to really start to think as Crowns in working with the court and probation and police, how we bring all these other sectors together, doing a robust interdisciplinary qualitative and quantitative research. And really to get an evidence-based understanding, we in sort of the criminal justice system, and we're getting better through COVID, and our ministry in Ontario has been getting better at really, looking at our own data and telling it, where's it going? But the interesting thing about justice centers and how we approached it is the intersecting data of, social service data, health data, education data, and how does that intersect housing first always, in terms of how we could promote change through this model. And really that resulted in the development of public-facing needs assessment reports that are available if anyone's interested, that we can share with you for each of the sites that we're working in. That is a foundational document that we gave back to communities, that said to communities, we, the Ministry of the Attorney General, we heard you across all sectors, and these are the elements of a community justice center model, of a community justice center court that could begin to start responding. It's not a panacea to address all, but it's steps that we in the justice system could really take, that we could, and that we could champion, quite frankly, and take accountability for. And I think what we ended up finding, and I'll turn it over to Holly momentarily, is that the justice system struggles to sort of address the needs of people who are cycling through our system. We all know that. We're not equipped to do that. And so how do we work sort of across sectors? And I know I keep talking about across sectors. We talk a lot about interdisciplinary work, but how do we meaningfully do it to really try to sort of get at the reasons that are bringing people into the criminal justice system, so we create sustainable pathways out? And I think post-COVID, as we all know, that people who are unrepresented accused, who were really having challenges before, are having even greater challenges, both accessing social services and community, and being, sort of processed in our courts. So it's even more important now. And sort of with that, I'll turn it over to Holly to take you through, how these needs assessments, how the work that we did translated into putting all this into action.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Okay, so Dana has explained the how of our community needs assessment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how those findings were used to design our 4 Justice Center pilots, and to make sure that those pilots were meaningfully responsive to local need and circumstances. And I'm going through all 4, and I'm not sure we've ever done it in this sort of time. We're running behind, so bear with me. So we're going to turn to London first. And our London needs assessment, when we sort of looked to it to say, what did it say? We noticed that young adults aged 18 to 24 in London were falling through the cracks. We know that the demographic was disproportionately involved with the justice system. We know that one of every 6 cases in the London courthouse involved a young adult accused. So we had a lot of them. We also know that this particular demographic in London was really struggling with housing, as well as mental health and addictions crises. So to respond to this unique circumstance, the London Justice Centre was designed to specifically target this demographic, young adults aged 18 to 24, in particular those who are not in education, employment, or training, so NEET youth. And in designing the pilot, it recognized that young adults have needs that are sort of different, both from children and from more established adults. And to sort of address that, the pilot prioritized meaningful connection to skills and job training, education supports, as well as mental health and addiction services. The goal in London is to help participants avoid the adult criminal justice system in the first place. So some of the features that our pilot has includes an accelerated direct release initiative. So we're ensuring that all accused have their first court appearance within 4 weeks of police contact, whereas in the London courthouse, it's usually around 12 weeks. So we're seeing people in court sooner. We've also accelerated justice sector processes themselves. So most of our participants are going to receive disclosure, consult with duty counsel or counsel, completed their needs assessment, and have an individual plan prior to their first court appearance. And so for those of you who sort of spent time in the justice system and have familiarity with sort of the culture of complacency that the court speaks of in Jordan, that is sort of something nothing short of miraculous. In terms of community involvement, all participants are introduced to the justice system through a peer mentor and receive tailored needs-based referrals through dedicated cross-sector community case management teams, both from CMHA and St. Leonard's. And last but not least, the London Justice Centre runs out of YOU, a well-established youth hub in London. And we're trying to get Steve online. I think he's going to be here, the chief executive of YOU, to speak about the synergies of putting the Justice Centre in a youth hub like that. And I don't want to leave London before I tell you a little bit about our early outcomes after more than about a year of operation. We know that our Justice Centre in London has avoided 1,800 days of jail, over 5,000 days of reporting probation, over 700 court appearances. We know that 100% of participants have received services and supports. And we also know that 47% of participants who received referrals to employment training reported an improvement in their employment status after completing their matter. So it's a really nice tie-in back to our community needs assessment and confirmation that we're seeing service uptake and improvement in the areas that we were targeting from the very beginning. So if we move on to the Toronto Northwest.
Oh, that's my job. Sorry.
The Toronto Northwest. Okay, so the Toronto Northwest is the second pilot I'm going to be talking about. So what did our needs review tell us about the Toronto Northwest? It told us that these neighborhoods experience escalating gun crime and violence that often involves youth and young adults that we know is driven by complex and intersecting factors. It also informed us that 67% of the Toronto Northwest population identified as a visible minority, with 20% identifying as Black. And also, really interestingly, it told us that youth robbery cases represent the single most common offense at 2201 Finch. So more than 1 in every 5 cases is a robbery case versus about 1 in 11 that you see elsewhere. And, you know, if you catch Miriam Henry, our lead crown at the TNW, she gives a wonderful explanation of sort of a fascinating deep dive into why youth robbery is such an important offense. So be sure to catch her if you see her listed as a speaker. I don't have time to get into that, but we use this data from the needs report to craft a meaningfully responsive pilot. And the Toronto Northwest was designed to be a response to community violence and gun crime. It's aimed at the intersection of poverty and criminal justice on youth, and particularly racialized youth. We're talking ages 12 to 17, so we're operating under the YCJA at the Toronto Northwest. Its goal is to address the overrepresentation of young racialized and Black offenders. And in the Toronto Northwest, we really have 2 pilots running. The first is our first appearance pilot. And what it does, it ensures all 100% of out of custody youth are going to be streamed for a needs assessment and a rapid referral to community programs, regardless of whether their matter is going to be traversed back to 2201 and regardless of whether their matter will proceed to trial or not. We have a second stream that is a targeted robbery pilots that puts all out of custody youth charged with a robbery on a judicial case management plan that involves working with cross-sector case managers to develop a plan to put in place all of the supports that Dana was talking about. And I'm going to spend a few minutes just to talk about some of the really unique features of the Toronto Northwest. We have a specialized, one-of-a-kind education advocate from Justice for Children and Youth who is dedicated to reconnecting youth with school and with training. It's an effort to interrupt the school to prison pipeline. And really interestingly enough, we know that 46% of youth who are referred to our education advocate improve their educational status, meaning they've actually been registered for school, they've been admitted back to school after expulsion. So we're really, it's a really fascinating feature. We also have a dedicated child and adolescent forensic psychiatrist. We also have been working with Delta Family to develop new and innovative, culturally relevant programming to develop a strong and positive sense of racial identity for youth. Another partner we have is Luminous to provide individualized systems navigation and case management services. And we're seeing our navigators send people to about 37 unique different agencies. As in London, we're getting people to court sooner. We have an accelerated direct release initiative. So we're actually seeing people within 21 days of police contact. And we're getting our cases through the system faster, an average of 15 weeks, about 8 weeks faster than you see at the at 2201. Turning to the Downtown East. Okay, so the Downtown East, what did our needs assessment tell us about the Downtown East? It told us that the Downtown East of Toronto is home to some of the most challenging public safety issues and hardest to reach populations in the city of Toronto, and that many of these people are struggling at the intersection of poverty, homelessness, mental health, and addictions challenges. Some really interesting pieces that were pulled out of the needs assessment to craft the pilot include the fact that 77% of College Park cases start in bail, compared to a provincial average of 39. So a very, very significant, almost 80% of cases are going to start in bail. And that we also know that of those cases that were held for bail, most of them, 63%, are going to ultimately be released. It's a very significant statistic that we've used to sort of mold our our pilot. We also know that almost 50% of College Park cases are property or AOJ, so administration of justice related offenses, so a disproportionate amount compared to other jurisdictions. And we know that many offenders in the Downtown East are not first-time offenders, many are chronic offenders. So we took our needs assessment to say the situation that we're seeing in the Downtown East is we have a lot of high needs individuals who continue to cycle through College Park without really the underlying risk factors being addressed. And it's resulting in high levels of recidivism related to sort of low and mid-level offending, which this chronic reoffending is driving a disproportionate number of accused who are being held for bail, right? In light of their lengthier records, particularly lengthier records weighted down with a lot of AOJ offenses, makes it very difficult for people to get bail. So we're seeing accompanying swollen remand populations. So to respond to this situation, the Downtown East was designed to be a hybrid justice and health center to sort of provide critical wraparound services to prevent these really complex and high needs clients from just cycling through College Park in the Downtown East again and again. So in order to really address this remand issue, we actually have an embedded Crown at 51 Division. They collaborate with the police to try to avoid unnecessary bail hearings, to try to reduce remand populations, to try to facilitate direct releases. So we're trying to reduce these numbers, the number of days in jail that we see people being held on remand when it may not be necessary. We're also working with Sound Times, a survivor outreach organization, a survivor-led outreach organization, I'm sorry. And what they've also done is at Sound Times, they also provide supported access to a video suite, which allows participants to attend Sound Times and use their video suite to attend court. It's actually been wildly successful and a really well-used resource in order to improve access to justice. We've been working with ICHA, the largest homeless health organization in Canada, to provide access to on-site primary care, psychiatric and addictions medicine services, and Surrey Place to provide tailored case management services for individuals with developmental disabilities. And before I leave our two Toronto pilots, I just want to flag here that we have partnered with the City of Toronto, both the Downtown East and the Toronto Northwest, and we have Scott McKean here, who, as soon as I give you a little sneak peek at Kenora, is going to talk to you about the importance of intergovernmental partnerships in the Downtown East and the Toronto Northwest. So I'm just going to talk about Kenora for just a very short period of time. Our last pilot is Kenora. Unlike all the other ones, this hasn't launched yet. We anticipate launching in late spring 2022, pending approvals. And this is the pilot that Kylie Swift from Reciprocal Consulting is going to be speaking about a little bit later. And what did the needs assessment in Kenora tell us? It emphasized that Indigenous peoples are overrepresented in the criminal justice system as survivors of crime, accused person, and offenders. We know that these individuals face many challenges rooted in forced relocation, loss of culture, involvement in child welfare, systemic discrimination, and racism. And so to guide the ministry's work, oh, could I get the next slide? Awesome. To guide the ministry's work in Kenora, a Kenora Justice Center Advisory Council has been developed. It includes participation by Indigenous leadership from Grand Treaty number 3, NAN, elders, the Ontario Court of Justice, and a whole bunch of key sort of cross-sector community organizations. And it's also supported through a broad engagement structure based on the Anishinaabe clan model, which you'll actually see here in this graphic. And the vision for Kenora is to be responsive to the needs assessment and to focus on Indigenous overrepresentation and healing. And what we're doing is we're looking to establish a continuum of criminal Indigenous restorative justice processes. We're looking to prioritize and accelerate the use of post-charge diversion, reduce over-reliance on those short, sharp sentences that you tend to see in favor of more community-based dispositions. And the idea is to create accessible pathways to Indigenous-led service and culturally relevant trauma-informed multi-sector supports to wrap around our participants. And as Dana mentioned, in this one, there's going to be a real emphasis not only on sort of providing wraparound services to accused, but also to particularly to victims and survivors of crime. It's not up and running yet, but we've got a lot of positive momentum behind it at the moment. So please stay tuned because we're going to be happy to share what's going on. So after I've given you this I hope this brief snapshot of demonstrating how we used our needs assessment to create responsive, meaningful pilots in community. And the next part of this presentation focuses on other areas of development. So key areas that are really important to Justice Center development, but it's also really easy to overlook them. And for that reason, we sort of wanted to shine a light on them. And so with that, I'll introduce you to Scott.
Oh, you're on mute, Scott.
You think I could figure out that mute button? Thank you so much, Holly and Dana. It's really an honor to be here, and thank you for making time to learn about this project. It's really an important one, and I have the honor of working directly embedded in Dana's team. And so I work for the City of Toronto, but half of my time goes to supporting justice centers and supporting Dana and Holly and working with the team on advancing this project. How it relates to my work in the city is actually, you know, an opportunity in itself. And so I've been involved in a number of sort of multi-sector initiatives over the years, as you've heard from my bio, and I've always worked with many different players, systems, and communities to try to drive better outcomes. And you know, historically, I had met Dana and had been supporting the justice centers during the consultation and the process of those needs development or needs assessments that Holly spoke to really help identify the need, and was part of the early development of sort of being part of the consultations and providing insight into the direction. What really prompted an opportunity was leveraging existing, sort of provincial city or provincial municipality relationships. And we had an opportunity as a result of the Community Safety and Policing Act. And so in 2019, the ministry or the province of Ontario legislated that every municipality across the province of Ontario develop a community safety and well-being plan. And I just so happened to be the sucker who was leading that on the city side. So we just found out that, here is an opportunity to think really differently. And the goal, within the planning framework for community safety and well-being is really about, what an anonymous attendee put in the chat. We talked about, or I guess in the Q&A, they talked about, sort of, it's great that we're working with offenders through the justice system, but there's mental health, poverty, addictions issues, and wait lists and lack of services. And, the whole premise of community safety and well-being is really transferring from, thinking about safety as policing or about crime, and thinking about upstream and trying to reduce our reliance on emergency response by thinking about risk intervention, prevention, and social development. And so the City of Toronto embraced the development of a community safety and well-being plan, and we, through working with the Justice Center and working with a number of other stakeholders, consulted thousands of people of all walks of life, people who are people who are victimized people who service people who are moms and dads in communities and have their own particular lens on community safety and well-being. And we talked to a bunch of people, and we developed SafeTO. And so, following the legislative direction, we passed a community safety and well-being plan. And Dana, if you could please go to the next slide, that'd be great. SafeTO, what it really is a multi-directional or multi-year plan. Just go one back, please, Dana. Thanks. A multi-year, really comprehensive plan that is going to help us really bring multiple systems together to serve Torontonians and think differently about how we can work collaboratively across systems and really try to be proactive instead of reactive. And so that's at the heart of SafeTO. It really consists of 26 actions that are across 7 strategic goals, and it's grounded in principles that we heard directly from residents that are important, including do no harm, and including embedding an access, equity, and human rights lens. And one other important principle that Dana talked about when she mentioned that our work on justice centers is iterative, and so to have a responsible but evolving practice and change to meet the needs of community, and don't just lock into a strategy forever that you're going to do the same thing as community changes and needs change. And so we built this framework out, and Dana, if you can go to the next slide, please. And as I said, there's 26 actions across 7 strategic goals. I won't go through all of them, because they're really high level, and the city's made a commitment for like a decade to really pursue this approach. And so we're looking at this over the long term. But we've also embedded justice centers right into the heart of our community safety and well-being plan, because as a city, in addition to the work that's happening, within the justice centers, what we're also interested in is taking what we're learning from those and driving preventative investments and partnerships and collaborations to try to prevent people from, getting involved in the justice system in the first place. And so we, as a city, we play a role as a service provider. We also play a role as a funder. And so from a service provider lens, we have programs that directly interface with both justice center programs. And I'll speak about that in a second. And then from a funding perspective, we fund investments either that directly service folks that are in the justice center or actually actively work to prevent them from going there in the first place. And so we have interest in multiple areas of the space. So this is the heart of our community safety and well-being plan. Dana, if you could go to the next slide, please. So in July of 2021, the City Council adopted the plan, which was great. And then they asked us to develop an implementation plan. And so just recently, at the end of February 2022, City Council adopted Safe Teal implementation plan, which really is like an overview of what we hope to do with year one, because this is such a massive undertaking. And so we narrowed it down into 3 areas. And so there's 4 strategic actions, which I'll talk about in a second. And then there's a number of initiatives that includes both justice center pilots that we will enhance and move forward within the 2022 year. And then there's also some infrastructure actions, both from a systemic point of view in terms of infrastructure to be able to sustain the work of SafeTO, but also infrastructure in terms of intergovernmental partnerships that enables us to work together. And to support that, City Council invested $12 million in the plan, and which directly impacts multiple actions, including justice centers. And Dana, if you can go to the next slide, please. The justice center, or the SafeTO sort of priorities for the first year are in the areas of mental health. And so we've established an alternative to policing community crisis support service that responds 24/7 to mental health calls. And we've initiated 4 pilots in the city. This will interface with both justice center sites indirectly because it'll be servicing mental health calls in the community from a preventative standpoint, and we'll work actively with partners who are actually engaged in the justice centers. Another area that's of great interest in our City of Toronto and priority within our first year is about creating a Toronto office to prevent gun violence, to drive a multi-sector approach to reducing gun violence. And so we're actually looking to partner in new ways. And actually, this has been inspired by the work that I do with justice centers. And we're creating a platform in which cities from multiple, or staff from multiple systems can work with the city embedded in an office that will help sort of be laser focused on gun violence. And so that's another opportunity. A third priority is about expanding our support for victims, which again will interface with justice centers, specifically to gun violence, but also leading trauma-informed, culturally responsive approaches. And so we've been building bridges with the justice center participants and to be able to support folks that have been impacted or victimized. And then in the last area is really about data. And so this is about using what we're learning to inform what we're doing and really innovate in real time to be responsive to community. Dana, if you can go to the next slide, please. So as I talked about, I have a very unique role. I work across government, and I credit that to Dana and her vision, and the 2 of us coming together with our wacky ideas. But we've created a mechanism where I actually work across 2 institutions. And so I support Dana and the team in the Justice Center space, but then I work and lead city initiatives. And that enables me to do a couple of different things. One is to leverage resources across both governments and try to connect them together. And the second is to be the translator of the languages that governments use that don't connect to each other, and to define the opportunities. And so as a result of that, you know, it's still early days, but you know, we've heavily informed, as a city, we've heavily informed the design of justice centers and identified key, like strategic, you know, action plans and strategies or investments that can enable support for the justice centers. So for example, in the Toronto Northwest, you know, we helped identify some of the populations that we were consulting. We've identified partners to be part of the steering committee and working groups. We've invested directly in service navigation and youth employment to support the Justice Center. And we're also looking at space to support the initiative. The Downtown East, excuse me, you know, we've invested in housing supports, and so we've brought some agencies that the city invests in already to help support underhoused people that are coming through the Justice Center. And we're also, you know, looking at space development in the Downtown East and how to leverage city space for ongoing sustainable operations of the Downtown East Justice Center. And, you know, I think like the most important thing is that our plans complement each other, because to community, they don't necessarily know the difference between a provincial strategy or a city strategy. It's all just like government talking at them, you know. And what we're trying to do is actually embed ourselves in community and work with community so that they understand that. And so with the approach that we've taken to justice centers, we've identified an action plan as a city, and we've identified how the justice centers, both of the justice centers in the city of Toronto, advance actions. And so that chart that I showed you, the 26 actions, the justice centers, both the justice center pilots actually advanced 12 of those actions. And so, you know, as a result, that really enhances and connects intergovernmental investments. And the goal is to integrate them so our investments are complementary, to look at enhanced cross-government planning. So as we build this out and as we learn more about the participants, it's my job to then take that and put it in front of service planning folks at the city, so we can actually plan for, you know, the kind of risk factors we're seeing in the Justice Center, and better use city, you know, city resources to be able to respond. And then the alignment of other municipal priorities. So, for example, the Toronto Northwest site really advances the city of Toronto's Confronting Anti-Black Racism plan, you know, and really has embraced the principles and practices of that strategy in the operation of the plan. So just as a couple of examples, I know that we have a lot of content to get through, so I'm going to pass it over to Youth Opportunities Unlimited, and happy to answer any questions when we get to the end. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Scott. And Steve, I hope we have you. It is a lot. We did start a little bit late, everyone, and I know Justice Barnes said we could, you know, take ourselves a bit further. So I think I have about 36 minutes so far in, but please let us know, Justice Barnes. We have both Steve Cordes and Kylie Swift really as the village to bring to you. So Steve, are you here? I can't really see.
I am. Can you see me or hear me?
Oh, there you go, Steve. As always, such a pleasure to have you.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks, Dana, and thanks everybody. I've been online the entire time, but having technical issues to be seen to be online. So a few challenges that are new to me on technology today, but we got through it. And thanks to Nida for her support as well. So Dana, I'll trust you just to click through the slides as we go through. So, very quickly, actually, you can go to the next slide. To position a bit about youth opportunities, you heard in my intro a little bit about myself. The organization's been around since 1982, so 40 years now. And always at the root of it, I'm not going to talk about all the programs and services, but rather what is its purpose. And always at the root of what Youth Opportunities is, has always been envisioned as a place-based resource for young people in our community, in our region, particularly those folks that are having trouble experiencing success in the labor market. And over time, that's deepened our program offerings to include where homelessness and mental health issues and addictions issues and many other challenges are in the way of fundamentally labor market success. YOU has either developed program responses directly or in so many cases has worked with community partners together to create a place-based approach that at the heart of it is all about a welcoming and a safe place for young people to come into services, whether they're simply walking in a door and looking for a team and an individual that can help them with a career launch. Maybe they finish school, on over to young people that have been experiencing homelessness for some period of time and aren't prepared or even fathoming that they're going to talk about careers or employment or education and so on, but instead are really focused on key, significant, and important survival modes. And the organization has really looked at a very dynamic range of services that offers all of that in partnership with so many others. So we go to that next slide. I think the next slide kind of helps position where does youth justice overlap with the ongoing interests at Youth Opportunities Unlimited. So you're looking at a couple of the buildings that are physical assets for YOU. They're in our historical downtown in London. And we acquired these properties over a period of time. The two buildings that you're looking at kind of face each other at one of the primary gateways into the downtown at Richmond and York Street, so across from our VIA station, easy access to public transit and lots of other service providers. Within the Justice Center space, where Justice operates out of, there already is a social enterprise, and you see that red circle. We'll talk a bit about that. There's 30 affordable apartments in the building, actually in both of those buildings, 34 altogether, all targeted to young people. But within that building also, there's a healthcare facility. There are two high school programs. Thames Valley District School Board operates alternative education centers within that space, and community providers are already coming into a bit of a hub model already. So expanding that to include a Justice Center platform really was a great opportunity to bring that warmth, that purposeful intention around why these services are available to a quite marginalized population that are in adversarial relationships with a whole bunch of people right now and are looking for, I think, what some people have called an off-ramp to the adversarial relationships they've got. And there's lots of off-ramps here. So if you look on the right-hand side there, for example, that's an image of a building called the Cornerstone. The social enterprise is a platform where we use a cafe, but we have other social enterprises as well. We have a recycling facility. We have quite an advanced wood shop facility, and we're about to launch our pre-construction labor training program, all for young people to help give them that work experience, that confidence, that understanding of a job market, and so on, so they can use the tools, the resources, the learnings that they've acquired in a social enterprise and advance that into longer term attachment to the job market. For some, that means working in the area they were trained in, so in the cafe. For some, it means that they're going to have a career and want a career and a job in the food and beverage industry. And if so, that's easy access to them. But for some, they're going to learn all kinds of transferable skills that will take them out of that industry, but into something else. And YOU's model is such that there's employment counselors, job developers, other resources, some funded by the province, some funded by the city, some funded by the federal government, to kind of provide that seamless approach to next steps for people. So within that building, when you walk in, the Justice Center in that bottom right-hand corner there, that's the intake model, and you're gonna meet an intake team, and you're gonna have quick and easy access to a youth mentor. That mentor is somebody primarily who's had lived experience, whether it's with justice or with other areas of being marginalized, where they can be that friendly, non-threatening face, age-appropriate face, and somebody that's going to just help somebody get settled in so they can be the best they can be, so that their fears, their mental health issues, their isolation aren't getting in the way of their interactions with the court system, with the justice system. So you heard about the stats and so on, but we thought that that was really important. It's what we do already at YOU. And we thought that was an important addition we could bring to a Justice Center model. So you see the Justice Center occupies several spaces, including on the rooftop of that building on the right-hand side of the screen, where there actually is a rooftop meeting room. We call it our community meeting room, but that's also a courthouse. So Justice Harris Bentley, when we're not virtual, will be sitting there presiding over court along with all the other folks that will be part of the system. And it really helps put into place what's envisioned on a community justice model. And that is a courthouse that meets the needs of what a courthouse needs to be all about, but doesn't add the threatening nature of what typically a courthouse is all about. So it was a pre-existing room, so we're able to integrate the new use into that room. So on to the next slide. That just gives you a sense of, for us, everything is all about, you know, again, creating a culture and a space where people are welcomed. So I won't go into all the slides. There's a lot of text within each of these. But the woman with the multicolored hair, when she posed for that picture, she was actually staying in a shelter. She's experiencing homelessness. And the youth shelter that you heard about in my bio is a housing first youth shelter. So low barriered, so pet friendly, individual rooms for individual people, 30 individual rooms. Our staffing ratio is 1 staff for every 8 participants, and shelters can often be up to 1 to 80, and we're 1 to 8. And the reason that we're so high on the staffing ratio relative to others is because really the purpose is to provide a safe place to land, but not a place to be. And instead bring the housing supports and so on, so people can move on out of that. So while this young woman was staying in a shelter, she was also exploring apprenticeships with Fanshawe College. The woman on the left spoke at a breakfast. You'll see an image on a breakfast later on, which speaks to community engagement, community change. For us is an important part of what we do. But that young woman experienced 5 years as a young homeless individual. So living often in tents, so sleeping rough, and at times staying in the shelter system. And at age 21, never was convinced she would not see her 22nd birthday, was certainly having a lot of interactions with many, many parts of our community, and not all of it positive at all. For the past 4 years, she's been working at a financial services organization where she landed that job because she was headhunted while being trained in our social enterprise in that cafe that you saw an image of earlier, being trained in customer care. And somebody who works in HR in the financial services industry asked her if she was looking to make a leap into financial services, particularly in the area of insolvency. And she jumped at the opportunity. She's had 4 promotions since then. And it's just been an amazing part of how these weaves, how these services all thread together. So we're on to the next slide. Again, I won't talk about every single image in there, but a big part of what we do is community engagement. So if you look at the one image in the upper right with the room full of people, those people, that was our last in-person Breakfast for You, which is a fundraiser for YOU. Our keynote speakers every year are young people who've graduated from our services. So the middle image are the 2 speakers there. And it's one of the largest events that we have, fundraising events in our city. There's 1,500 people that gather to hear the lived experience of somebody who's experienced marginalizations in many ways. And this person spoke about trauma and spoke about actually homelessness and sleeping in parks, and spoke about also involvement in the justice system, but also spoke about his last 2 years as an entrepreneur. And he comes back to Youth Opportunities once a quarter to make a donation to us, along with his mom, who's in that picture with him. I'm going to keep moving along because I know that we're a bit short on time. So the next slide there speaks to what's the model of care look like. So for us, all those bubbles are represented sometimes by services that YOU provides directly, and sometimes there's services that we offer in partnership with other community providers. But it gives a sense of everything rallies around the youth, on the thinking that the young person that walks in our door, and I think Scott talked about this, it's not about who employs the person that supports people. It's about what are the resources that are available to them. They don't care where people's paychecks are drawn from. What they care about is who can help me with this, who can help me with that. And for us, whether we deliver the service or our partners, we try to make sure that the youth are in the center of everything we do. The final few slides really just give a scale of what the organization does. So you'll see another image of the building, some of the stuff that we do around what we call transition services. If we click onto the next slide, a good sense of what of some of our employment services and career services. So images of young people, 2 of them are people that were in a chef apprenticeship program at that time. Both of them would have experienced, traumatic challenges around getting to that point, but they got to that point with great success and a lot of community support. The next slide talks about our social enterprises. Again, we've highlighted those and what the purpose of those are about. And then finally, the last 2 slides I'm going to look at. 340 Richmond is a project with CAS. I know that Justice talks about the challenges of young people that age out of care. One of our very active partners is Children's Aid Society of London Middlesex, and we have multiple partnerships with them. One of them is that building that's below the picture there. 6 apartments specifically set aside for young people aging out of care through the Revisor program. YOU and CAS case managed together to support young people towards successful independent living. And then the very final slide that I'll touch on is just a sense of what's coming up next. And that's a larger project with, in addition to the partnerships we have already. The province, just before the writ dropped, announced that they had selected London Middlesex as a site for a youth wellness hub site. And that youth wellness hub site will be anchored in that building called Jones Place. So again, more fleshing out of the partnership model around people.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I think as you may be asking yourselves, how we bring these people together, and before we get to reciprocal, because I'm really excited for everyone to hear about Kylie, is just, we talk about the development of community courts, whether it's Red Hook and the infrastructure, but there's so much infrastructure and supports and integrated service delivery like YOU, and it's the magic of therapeutic courts can be the integration and the partnership with organizations like YOU, because we all can't do it in our courthouses. And I think it's what we wanted to show you is that is the magic of criminal justice transformation, is exactly partnerships with the likes of Scott and the likes of Steve that can change things in respective communities. And with that, and with the importance of sort of taking an evidence-based approach and looking at wellness and healing in a different way for our model in Kenora. Really, Kylie, thank you. I know you were short for time today, and Justice Barnes, I know we're over time, although we started late, but I'll turn it over to Kylie and thank everybody for their patience today, because the work that Reciprocal's doing is nothing short of amazing, and we're so excited to work with them. Kylie?
Thank you, Dana. And just to honor everyone's time, I think I can keep this pretty condensed and then, make space for questions. So Tonchikiawao, everyone. I'm with Reciprocal Consulting, and I'll just share a little bit about who we are and our role at the Kenora Justice Center pilot. The Reciprocal Consulting is an Indigenous owned and run research, evaluation, and consultation firm. And our home office is located on the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples in West Vancouver, but we do have satellite offices in Saskatchewan and Ontario. I would say that our consulting firm specializes in working with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities and organizations. And I say working with, but also working for. We've been in operation for nearly 20 years and have a vision to contribute to the ongoing well-being, self-determination, and nation building of Indigenous communities through storytelling and leadership. Our values of respect, relevance, reciprocity, and responsibility are core to all of our work, and relationships are both the foundation and the glue for the work that we do. We have a mission to witness the brilliant work that is happening in communities and really lift it up and share and translate the knowledge in a way that centers Indigenous voice, is relevant and responsive to the communities we are working with, and contributes to systems change. We also have a mission to reciprocally mentor Indigenous peoples in program evaluation and research, which I'll get into is relevant to this project. Our aim is really to make space for and create opportunities for Indigenous youth and professionals, and to support community-based community-based research and evaluation. We also uphold Indigenous ways of knowing and doing, as well as uphold all the work that contributes to the holistic well-being of our communities. We have 6 core areas of services, but the ones that are really relevant to this project are the research and evaluation, as well as the mentorship. So our firm really began with a focus on research and evaluation, and we specialize in Indigenous culturally responsive evaluation, where we really focus on a human-centered approach to the work. We also provide individualized mentorship services in addition to the other services we offer, but primarily for the purpose of this work, we'll be focusing on the evaluation aspect. Our team is comprised of 18 full and part-time members. You'll see some photos of us up there, not everyone, but most of us. We've developed our knowledge and skills through our connection with our families and communities, as well as our professional work and our various Western educations up to the graduate level. Collectively, we have about 80 years of experience conducting evaluation and research projects and have successfully completed over 350 discrete projects all across Canada. So we have a fair amount of depth to our experience. As for the Kenora Justice Center pilot evaluation, sorry, lost my train of thought there. We've been contracted by the Ministry of the Attorney General to support the evaluation of the Kenora Justice Center pilot evaluation. And just to talk a little bit about our approach, we really do center values in our work, and not just our own values, but the values of the folks that we're working with as well. We uphold and honor the ways of knowing and doing of the communities we are working with, and really take a strength-based approach with a deep commitment to research and evaluation that lifts up the work that's being done in community. We're also very collaborative and participatory, where we work continually with key individuals to ensure that our work remains relevant and aligned with the needs of those we're working with. In the end, we really want to ensure that the work that we do is useful. And we also, through our work, try to implement the principles of ownership, control, access, and possession. That's often top of mind. As mentioned, so we have been contracted by the Ministry of Attorney General, and we're going to be focusing on both a developmental evaluation, looking at the process as well as outcomes. We have a phased approach to the work, as you'll see in this slide here. In the first phase, we'll really be focusing on building on the work that has already been done to co-create an evaluation strategy for the Kenora Justice Pilot Center. And then once the evaluation strategy has been approved, we'll gather and analyze the data and share back through an interim report. The second phase, we'll revisit our approach and methods, ensuring that they're still relevant, and make updates as needed. And then we'll continue our data gathering activities. Our final report is expected to be complete March 2024. But I will note we will be sharing findings throughout the evaluation, just to make sure that our work is responsive, relevant, and timely. So it's not like there'll just be a final report at the very end that people will have lessons learned after the fact. And then final slide here, we just want to acknowledge that we're not local to the area, which is important because we really believe in community-based research. Billy Jo Rogers, who was unable to attend today, is co-leading the research and evaluation. She's a member of Aamjiwnaang First Nation and heads our Ontario satellite office located in Brantford, just outside of Six Nations. Mentorship and supporting community-based research and evaluation is part of Reciprocal Consulting's mission. So as a result, we've built mentorship into the evaluation work plan. Our intention is to collaborate with the Kenora Justice Center team and local Indigenous leadership to identify and determine an appropriate mentorship plan that's useful and suitable. Potential mentorship activities could look like, but are not limited to, the provision of training workshops, individualized mentorship for one or more key individuals in community, or the development of an evaluation toolkit or other useful resources, because it really goes back to the reciprocal in our values, where we have no intention of just flying in and flying out, leaving the work behind. we want it to be relevant and to build on what's there, and then also leave something that can continue to grow and thrive. And that's about it.
Well, thank you, Kylie. And I like ending on this piece because I think it's a little bit of a beginning for us. And it really is, you know, about giving back to community, being transparent with community, and learning from what we're doing, because what doesn't work, we shouldn't continue doing. And as a justice sector and system, we haven't been so great at that. And I think that's what moves us all to like look for change, promote change, and be the change that we all need to be, and be accountable to ourselves and the people that we serve. So I know we've gone over. I really want to thank each of the speakers who came together on really short notice to participate today. And thank you to the association for having us, the village that is justice centers in disparate places across Ontario, coming to you to just share the work and share the inspiration for the art of the possible, the art of what we hope works, and the art of what we will change if it isn't working. And I do want to just take a moment to highlight the collaboration with the Ontario Court of Justice, the Chief Justice, the Associate Chief Justices, the Regional Senior Justices, because this is a court model and we have sitting judges, and this is a new model for the court, for the province. And really, we couldn't have done it without them, and for their willingness to take a leap of faith, which isn't something that's easy for the judiciary, but is critical for all of us, as well as for crowns and police officers, all of whom, you know, are learning to work differently with all of the people that you see here today. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to the association, and thank everybody for having us.
Yes, thank you. On behalf of the association, we really enjoyed your presentation today. We could have listened to you for days, I think. It's been very exciting, and it's invigorating to hear about all of the changes that everybody's working towards across the province. And I can't wait to see what you guys have in store in the future. I'll be looking forward to hearing some more of your results. So again, on behalf of the association, thank you everyone for joining us, and thanks to our speakers. We always have new webinars coming up. If you keep an eye on our website, we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.